public appointments and is backing Brexit, and financial journalist Paul Gosling voted to remain. Felicity Huston, whoever came up with this form of breakfast hasn't really given much thought to the only UK land border with the EU, which is us here in Northern Ireland.
Well, I think, we'll manage. I mean, when last time I drove from France through to Switzerland and back again, nobody stopped me. There were no queues of lorries going backwards and forwards. I'm just using it as an example. There are borders all over the place where people seem to be able to move backwards and forwards. And because of electronic systems nowadays of monitoring, particularly in the commercial world, I would have thought that's how it was going to work. I'm much more concerned as an owner of 2 border collies, this issue of how my collies are going to get backwards and forwards across the border that was raised yesterday.
Michael Lux did say this morning, we put it to him that is an electronic border possibly a way of doing this to make the process smoother? He laughed. He said no, there will be a customs check. Lorries will queue up.
Well, he would say that, wouldn't he? I mean, it's the background he comes from. I mean, if he'd said anything else, I would have been astonished. That's his view of life. That's what he's spent his whole life doing, working out how the system should work within the EU and not outside it. So that's how he sees things. So that's his view. I'm sure there are other people who have other views.
But the queues are there on the Sweden-Norway border, so what makes you think that they won't be here?
Well, because I've heard that both the Inland Revenue and the Irish Revenue Service have said that they're working very closely together to make sure that there's a smooth transition of vehicles backs and forwards across whatever form of border we have.
Paul Gosling, not a good time to be living in Derry and working in Donegal or vice versa?
We don't know, do we? I mean, this is the real problem. There's so much uncertainty about what happens. I speak to business owners regularly who say that they have put investment on hold until we know what Brexit means for the border, because it could potentially not just disrupt the flow of products going to market, but it could also interrupt the flow of people going to work and people doing their shopping. So there's a lot of uncertainty here. And ultimately, the decision will not be one which is just taken between the Irish and British governments. It will be a decision taken by the European Union and through negotiations with the UK, where UK will not actually be in a very strong position to negotiate.
Do you think that the EU and the UK, that both of them are aware just really of what the situation is here? Do they actually have any idea?
Well, the European Union clearly does understand, because it's been putting a lot of resources over the years into supporting the peace agreement. I do worry about whether cabinet ministers actually fully understand the realities of border life, and because I think really that this is a last-minute thought for a lot of them in terms of what's going to happen with the border. I mean, if some of them came over for a couple of weeks and understood what border life was actually like in Northern Ireland, perhaps they would be more sympathetic to the case we're putting forward.
Felicity Huston, how do you think this border is going to work? You think that it's going to be a smooth process?
I do. I think, in the modern world we live in, and because of electronic tagging and following and so on, I mean, most VAT stuff is all done electronically and everything already, I don't think it'll be a problem. I mean, as an accountant, I have clients, hundreds of them, who work abroad and travel backwards and forwards from outside Schengen, outside the EU, through the EU, work there, etc. They are completely unperturbed about it. These are people who are doing it on a daily basis. The prospect of us leaving wasn't worrying them when the referendum came up. The result of the referendum has not worried them, and it has not affected their businesses. So I go by my daily experience with my clients.
But this will take some time to implement. Obviously, there's 2 years of discussion ahead until we leave to get that process in place. Is that enough time, really, for a system that works and works smoothly to be set up here?
Well, isn't it remarkable what people can do if they want to? And I mean, I just thought the financial incentives for all involved in trade and commerce on this island would help us move along. If civil servants want to work at the speed of snails and be downright obstructive, that can happen too. But if people have genuine belief in making something work, of course they can get on with it.
Paul Gosling, the former Taoiseach John Bruton warned that Brexit could increase smuggling along the border. Do you think that's likely? Felicity Huston says this is going to be nice and easy, smooth process, depending, of course, on the civil servants and if they get that in place.
The extra smuggling is inevitable. We already actually have a lot of smuggling coming in, not just of actually legitimate goods, but also of counterfeits. That will increase. I mean, it's inevitable. If you have different tax rates on different sides of the border, it's inevitable there's going to be smuggling. And you go to any farm and you just walk across a field and you're across the other side of the border. It's impossible to fully police a border unless you built a wall in the way that Trump is talking about in Mexico. I mean, the reality is that we need to have special arrangements for Northern Ireland, recognising that effectively we are a small landmass in Ireland, which actually will be part of a different jurisdiction, and therefore we need a different arrangement. And basically we need a halfway house in Northern Ireland that's not quite within the UK and not within the European Union.
What does that halfway house look like? Theresa May has been quite firm. She has said that there is no halfway house for anyone. We make a clean break.
But we are in a different position. I mean, the reality is that the people who voted for Brexit were not in the main living in Northern Ireland. It was the south of England and the north of England and Wales that voted for Brexit. It was not Northern Ireland. Our situation is fundamentally different. It's fundamentally different through the Good Friday Agreement, but in practical terms, because of our retail arrangements, the travel to work arrangements, the common travel area arrangements, we have a different circumstance here, and that needs to be reflected in whatever the UK and European Union governments work out between them.
Felicity Huston, James Brokenshire, as well as Theresa May, has ruled out any special status for Northern Ireland. Paul Gosling seems to think that we need it. Do you agree?
Well, we always get some special deal, don't we? I mean, it always happens, and we're always saying, oh, we're different, and yet we'd like to be the same, and we'd like to just be treated like grown-ups. I'm sure they will come up with something which will settle people's nerves, the ones who are very worried about it all. Say, I am an optimist about all this. I think the people who voted to leave are optimists. We believe that we will manage fine. We're an adaptable nation. We've done it before in plenty of other circumstances, and we think it will happen again.
Felicity Huston and Paul Gosling, thank you both very much indeed. And Mark will have much more on that on his programme this afternoon. Mark.
Indeed, Amanda, people might have heard of this notion of the gift economy. It's where some players in the private sector choose to